We are from Team 3 gonna explain about the second bab of My Antonia. Let's check it out.
I will talk about Book 2, Chapter 1 till 3. Chapter 1. Almost 3 years after his move to the Black Hawk, Jim and his grandparents decided to leave their farm in the countryside for a house on the outskirts of town. Rather than seeking work at another farm, Otto and Jack decide to move to the Wild, Wild West to be silver prospectors. James' grandfather becomes the deacon of the new Baptist church. His grandmother hosts dinners for church function and for farmers coming into town. James began attending the school in town and quickly adjusts to the company of his new classmates. James questions Ambrose for any news about Antonia whenever Ambrose comes to the town. But Ambrose is stage-thrown and says little. Chapter 2. The Burden's nearest neighbors are the Herlings, a Norwegian family who also used to live on a farm. Three of the Herlings' children are around James' age, and their oldest sister, Frances, works in Mr. Helling's office. After the Helling's cook leaves them, James' grandmother convinces Miss Harlings to hire Antonia. They do and intend to pay Antonia well, including an allowance for her clothing. Chapter 3. With her arm's personality and easy way, Antonia is right at home among the Herlings, and she soon settles into a regular routine. Jim is jealous of her immediate admirations for Carly, but he is happy to see her again and spends more time at the Herlings.
Hello, my name is Siska Fibrana Sitompo, and I will tell you guys about a book called My Antonia by Willa Cater, and I will explain to you guys about the book 2 from chapter 4 to chapter 6. The chapter 4, there's some points. The first one, Antonia now living with Mrs. Harling. The second, Lena comes visits them and have an amazing conversation with them. And number 3, Lena works for Mrs. Thomas, the dressmaker. And for chapter 5, there's some point also as well. The first is the boys' home was the best hotel in Burlington where Tiny Soda works. Number 2, the traveling men were generous. They gave her handkerchief and gloves and ribbon and strip stockings and so many bars of perfume and cakes of scented soap that she bestowed some of them on Lena, which Lena also gave some to her brother for Christmas present. And for chapter 6, the first is there was a basic harmony between Antonia and her mistress, which is Mrs. Harling, and the second is they both had strong and independent natures. And number 3, on Saturday nights, Mrs. Harling used to play the old operas and organize party. So that's all. That's all that I gonna say. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name Aprila Orahmi. I will explain about chapter 7 to 9. Chapter 7. The only break in the long winter came in the March, when Blind de Arnold, a Negro pianist, came to Black Hawk. The townspeople gathered at the Boys' Home Hotel to listen in. Suddenly, the room where Antonia, Lena, and Tini danced was opened, so they joined the dancing with the men in the convention hall. Chapter 8. That June, 3 Italians named Venice came to Black Hawk from Kansas City to teach dancing. They set up a dancing pavilion while in town. Antonia and the other hired girl were like pavilion, which were, as Jim notes, a place where the girl could wear their new dress and where one could laugh heartily without reproach. They danced with the son of a rich family. Chapter 9. Jim noticed the young men are more interested with the hired girl than the perfect city girl. Jim realized the sacrifice and struggle of the hot girl made them even more beautiful. He looked back as an adult, realizing that because the hot girl made them a rich family.
Now we move to chapter 2, part 10. Antonia wanted out from Mr. Harling's house because Mr. Harling wanted Antonia got out from the tent and find another place. When the tent came to town, Antonia began to go about with Lena and Tini. She joined the tent and was the best dancer of them all. Antonia wanted to move to work to the cutter so she can be out a lot in the afternoon. Next, Wick Cutter, with first name was Wisecliff, was a moneylender who had fleeced poor Russian Peter. Cutter was one of the first set of Black Hawk businessmen. It was said Cutter had bald head, yellow whiskers that always soft and glistening, he was white teeth, and his skin was red and rough. He was notoriously dissolute with women. Cutter married Mrs. Cutter, was a terrifying-looking person. Giant body, iron gray hair, she had long and curved teeth, made every baby cry if she smiled at them. Part 12. After Antonia went to live with the Cutters, she seemed to care about nothing but picnics and parties. She went downtown every night with Tiny, Lena, and Anna. Charlie Harling was already at Annapolis while Jim still sitting in Black Hawk. Jim refused to join the Owls and then made a bold resolve to win a Saturday night dances at Fireman's Hall. Jim used to wish he could have the flattering dream about Antonia, but he never did. Thank you.
So in chapter 13, the author shows Jim is maturing. He rejects his grandparents' opinions about his choice of assisting with immigrants at the fireman halls. But he respects their feelings, denying his own desire to go. He doesn't feel obligated to follow the plans for his future career either, but instead of work hard, make his own path, writing a speech and end up impressing everyone. Because James finds his grandmother crying one day, and he guessed correctly she knows of his secret behavior. He promised to stop, although he claimed there is nothing wrong with going to dance or with the people who attend. Without the dance, he is bored and lonely despite devoting time to studying to get ahead for the college in the fall. Friends say that Mrs. Howling doesn't understand why is James prefer the country girl to the town girl, and friends believe James romanticizes the hired girls by putting a kind of glamour over them. James surprised everyone by giving a powerful speech at his commencement. Antonia said it's better than any lawyer in the town could give and wishes her father could have heard it. And Jim tells her talk of Mr. Shimerda as he wrote it. Jim in his account of his life says that the success of his speech is pulled at his heartstring more than another accomplishment. The book 2, chapter 14. Jim now is driven to move to the upstairs room of his house and focus on his study in preparation for the college. He took only a real break, and that was the trip to the river with Antonia, Tiny, Lena, and Anna Hansen. Jim swim in the river as he realized he will miss when he goes away, and the girls arrive with a wagon. They plan to collect the elder flowers to make wine. The scan of the flowers make Antonia think of Bohemia, where they had the elder flowers in the yard. She asks Jim if her father's spirit can go back to those old place, and Jim tells her of feeling he had after Mr. Shimerda death, and his spirit was indeed on his way back on his own country. Jim promised he will one day go back to Antonia home village. The girls reflect on how the life of immigrant is difficult and how they try to help their families. Lena vows to get her mother out of the house because the men will never do it. She plans to start her own business in a new town. They all play games and Jim tells the story of the Spanish explorers to the area. The sun begins to set, silhouetting a single plow against its redness. As the sun disappears, so too does the forgotten plow, to its own littleness somewhere on the pirate. Next to the chapter 15. The Cutters have to go to Omaha, but before they left, Mr. Cutter puts valuables under Antonia's bed and tells her not to leave the house at the night while they are gone. Antonia tells Mrs. Barden she feels worry. Mrs. Barden thinks it best if Antonia stay with them and send Jim to sleep at the Cutters instead. One night, Jim's awake to find Mr. Cutter leaning over him, touching his shoulder, becoming furious at finding a man in Antonia's bed. The two hit each other, and Mr. Cutter has his hand around Jim's neck for a time, but Jim escaped. Jim is badly beaten up but begs his grandmother to tell no one. He resents Antonia for his injuries. Mrs. Barden takes Antonia to collect her things from the Cutter homes, and while there's Mr. Cutter arrives in a rage. She tells Mrs. Barden that Mr. Cutter put her on the wrong train, telling her to go ahead to Black Hole, but really giving her a ticket to Kansas City so he could beat her home. Although he could have slipped away with another excuse, Cutter tricks her on purpose instead. Mr. Cutter enjoys enraging his wife as much as devil deeds, and looks forward to reckoning with his wife at the end of an escapade.